Terri-Lynn Duque recently wowed the attendees at Smart Energy in Halifax, and her talk about the art of collaboration and energy innovation. A sought after speaker and a voice for change in the electricity sector, TL is the founder and principal at Ignite Energy Solutions. She has spent nearly 20 years working with utilities and is currently working with the Energy Futures Lab to develop and deliver on a collective vision for Alberta's electricity sector. Please join me in welcoming TL. Hi, TL. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me here, Maria. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to the conversation.
Well, it was amazing because you really wowed the crowds at the Smart Energy event in Halifax. And that's what, got me to reach out to you because I wanted to have a further conversation about who you are and what you do because it's really groundbreaking. But first tell me about your consulting firm, how you help your clients build strategies, that focus on their customers, who would benefit, from net zero, electricity systems.
Yeah, for sure. So I've spent most of my career working for the electric utility. And so I like to start there because I think it's an important place to remind ourselves that mentality. Utility companies have always been focused on their customers from a safety and reliability perspective, two really core elements. But as I began my work over the last 2 years, really focusing on innovation and strategy, working on electrification and customer programs, and then both grid and regulate modernization, it became clear that the customer-centric approach is really going to be needed for us to properly really design our solutions and prioritize investments so that we could really get to net zero, keeping everyone in mind. And really, at the end of the day, this really does come back to how do we engage customers with electricity, and how do we ensure that the decisions that are being made are made in the best interest of those customers' needs, as well as long-term and short-term affordability. So the work that I do really is asking all of my clients to put their customer hat on first, to really build their solutions more from the bottom up than the traditional kind of top-down planning mentality that an electric utility would have, looking at things from kind of generation, transmission, distribution. We really flip things on its head and start with the customer first.
Well, I love that because, and what was always taught in marketing was what's in it for me. So you want to think about what's in the minds and the hearts of your customers and trying to match that. And you're certainly going to win them over. But how do you apply this to, let's say, energy, the leaders in the industry?
Yeah, I like where you went there because it's really important to be able to, I think, utilize this Simon Sinek approach, if you've ever heard of that, which is start with why. It's really understanding your core why. In his theory that he's proven out is that customers don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so while a lot of companies have focused on their corporate purpose, it's really important for leaders to be able to understand their why as well. And so I work with a lot of teams, really identifying what is it that they're really trying to achieve and how do you bring people along. Leaders in the energy transition, really one of the first core things is focusing on why it is that they're here. And for me, it's really easy for me. You saw at the beginning of my speech in Halifax, I started with my son, because at the end of the day, I think that I'm here to help that next generation, my son and his kids, have, a healthy environment and a clean world that they can live in. Finding that why at the beginning and really being able to lean into that helps us when it comes to those really tough decisions and those trade-offs when it comes to energy transition and those complexities that we have to deal with.
I love it. What do you recommend to the energy leaders and how they can build trust and how they can hold each other accountable?
And this is a good one. And this really starts to lean into not just the why, and the what, but how do we work together? And this is where there's been so much talk. You've heard this word over and over again in the electricity sector is in order to get there, we need to collaborate. And often we find ourselves using that term, but really not using it correctly, almost misunderstanding the meaning of the word. And for us, this is about moving through a spectrum of this idea of turf versus trust, moving from things like our initial communication and coordination into true collaboration. Collaboration really happens when you can, number one, when somebody starts first, you have to offer that olive branch out there in order to build trust, whether it's between two individuals or it's between two companies or a group of people. And one of the ways that you can actually do that is, beyond the trust building exercises that exist out there, is by building something together, by starting with a blank page, looking at a complex challenge and, beginning some kind of, design sprint exercise that you can go through. But it can also be broken down into something really simple. An example of, using an exercise to build something that builds trust that we've used in workshops before is using Lego. Build something that actually resembles the electricity system and then talk about it. It's really interesting how people go back into what their real feelings are about the electricity system, what we're doing here, and how we show up for customers. Just a building exercise like that. So I would say, building trust at the beginning is really important. And doing the work together. The other thing is that piece of holding each other accountable. As we move through this process of collaboration, ultimately we need to be able to divide and conquer those tasks. We can't do it all alone. And so we have to find the talents and strengths within the team and divide and conquer the work. And it's important, for me to know, if I'm working with you, Maria, what are you going to hold yourself accountable and how can I check in with you? Because at the end of the day, we've got a lot of work that needs to happen, and we need to be able to move quickly. So we're working together. That's one of the ways that we'll be able to do that is by holding each other accountable and checking in.
Well, I would imagine that, just to add on to this, there's a little bit of risk there. Like you're sticking your neck out, in fear of it being chopped off. Like you're kind of, there's all kinds of, we should have done that. We should have done this. Like, I guess that all adds into building a formula where that is alleviated, or what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, okay. So the shoulda, woulda, coulda is I almost did a TED Talk once called "We Really Should Stop Shining All Over Ourselves." But it's so true that, when we think about what we're trying to do here, it's never been done before. And the way that we've worked in the past is not going to be the way that gets us through this complex energy transition. So applying new thinking is important, and also really looking at ourselves at what's holding us back. So that fear is very real in terms of this fear of being judged, this fear of making the wrong decision. Even sometimes I think we might have a fear of succeeding because it could become, it's too big for us, too much for us to handle. And so we have to be able to get over that fear and really lead with hope instead of leading with fear. Particularly looking at, regulators, policymakers, and leaders in industry, in utilities, it has traditionally been a very risk-averse environment. Like you said, we talk about safety, reliability being number one. Those have to remain there, but we have to find a way to move through the unknown and the uncertainty and make decisions based on the best information we have today and remain flexible and know that we can shift those decisions. We can shift, the programs that we put in place. We can shift some of our investments. As those things are changing, the way that we're investing, we're no longer looking at just those long-term 40-year asset type of investments and decisions as leaders. We can look at things like non-wire solutions, things like energy efficiency, demand side management programs. And those types of things really do allow us to have that flexibility to hear how things are working with our customers, to adjust along the way.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work with the Energy Futures Lab in Alberta?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll start by just introducing who is the Energy Futures Lab before I talk about the work that I'm doing with them. The Energy Futures Lab is a social innovation lab. They're also a non-for-profit, and they focus their attention on some of the most complex challenges that exist within the energy transition. They've been doing this for a number of years, and they do it through a very large network of energy professionals. We're talking thousands of people that have come together over the years to identify some of the core challenges that are holding us back from moving forward. The social innovation methodology really goes beyond this idea of, technology being the challenge. It really talks about all the other system components, a lot of it being human decision making, that choice to adopt a new technology, as an example, those policies that need to be written and the regulations that need to fall out of those in order for customers to be in a position to adopt new technologies and to make new decisions. And so the lab really takes a look at many different challenges in the energy spectrum through that lens. The work that I've been doing with them is specifically focused on Alberta's electricity future. And over the course of the last year, we've built the largest and most diverse electricity coalition in the province to help build a vision for Alberta's electricity future, to identify the core barriers that exist between where we are today and that future vision, and then to kick off working groups that can really focus on tackling those barriers through small scale project opportunities.
Well, I love how you and I had a conversation earlier about, and I never thought about this, was how energy, electricity use can be very different between urban and rural. I mean, and I never thought about that. Like urban people have different use of it, and then rural people. So are you applying or having this approach, at the Futures Lab?
Yeah, absolutely. Within the work that we've been doing with the coalition, the first thing that we did when we gathered all of these leaders, each of them from different areas of the energy or the electricity system, so we've got generators, transmission owner operators, distributors, retailers, and then we've got this entire other piece of the coalition that has the non-traditional voices that represent industrial consumers, commercial customers, residential customers, farmers, rural and remote communities. So what we did was we invited all of them to come in and take off their corporate hat and immediately put on customer hat. And so they would represent one of those voices of either industrial, commercial or residential, rural or remote consumers. So that is how we began from a blank slate, building what does the future of Alberta's electricity system really need to look like. And over the course of working with these leaders, it was incredible for them to hear their core takeaway from each of these workshops was, wow, I can't believe how much I learned just from listening to other people's perspectives. And there's been a ton of research that our team has been doing over the course of the last year, really understanding the differences, like you said, between urban customers and rural customers as well. And when you look at rural customers, I mean, they've got a completely different expectation and an experience in terms of reliability than urban
Right.
customers do. That's, as a starting point. In Alberta, we also see an affordability challenge that exists between urban and rural customers. Well, rural customers pay higher distribution and transmission tariffs as well. So they're automatically, in a disadvantaged position when it comes to affordability. And the other thing, beyond just like the billing side of things and the end use of electricity, when we look at some of the renewable projects that are happening all throughout the province of Alberta and the provinces across the country for that matter, those developments are happening in rural environments. They're happening in rural land. And so this is about understanding, the land use and the trade-offs that need to happen in that rural environment is very different than the urban environment. And those, in many cases, renewables are seen, yes, as a challenge in terms of land use, but also the huge benefit in terms of tax revenue that really help create that revenue stream, but also a lot of jobs to keep people, working and in those rural environments in those small towns in Alberta. So
Let's you touched upon this just a couple of minutes ago, and that is around averting risk. No one really wants to be on the defensive. Everyone's very protective. They don't want to, speak out of turn or do anything that could alter the flow of anything. So how would they turn this around to a customer service approach? What are some easy, low hanging fruits that they could consider?
One of the things that I often will talk with my clients about is, what would you do? I mean, what do you need? And think about you, your family, your kids, your grandparents or your parents. Think about your single elderly neighbor down the street from you. I find that to be an actually a pretty easy thing. It's really about getting out of our own heads sometimes and putting on that view of someone else. But at the end of the day, we're all customers. So I would say that from a customer perspective is a really great tool that works. The other piece in terms of risk taking, really, yeah, I think the other piece there is that we also have to get out of our own way a little bit. We have to find that boldness inside of us. We're in leadership positions to make the tough calls. We're in leadership positions to make change happen. And so it's really incumbent upon us to move beyond that fear element that we talked about earlier, and really lean into our position of power and making those calls on behalf of those other folks that don't necessarily have that same seat at the decision-making table.
What would you like to leave behind today as a parting thought?
I would say that it's time for our leaders to come together, to truly find that way to collaborate. And collaboration scales. It can be done between you and I, Maria. It can be done between organizations, as we've seen with the Energy Futures Lab all across Alberta, and it can be done all across Canada. It really is about somebody moving first. It's about utilizing the systems that already exist, the working groups that are already out there, to bring people together to find common ground and to start moving forward, to find something that we can build together, whether it's really small or it's really large and complex. But that movement is really important. And coming back to those fundamentals that we're all human at the end of the day, and people-focused solutions are really about us and our families and the longevity of our society.
Wow. Now, everybody who listened to this episode now knows why you were so applauded in Halifax at the Smart Energy event. Thank you so much, TL. I love this way of thinking. And, I wish you all the best, with your consulting, but also with the Futures Lab, the Energy Lab. And, let's keep in touch. I'd love to have you back on sometime. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Maria. I look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you, TL, for the awesome conversation we just had. This podcast is sponsored by Smart Energy. They hold energy events in Halifax and in Vancouver. So be sure to sign up to one that's closest to you. There's awesome programs that are there and really interesting people to network with. I'm your host, Maria McGowan. Thanks so much for listening in today. And remember to subscribe through reimaginedenergy.com and sign up for an email or listen or watch to our previous episodes. Thanks again for joining. We'll talk to you next time.